Welcome to First in Fantasy Football. Today we're going to be looking at 3 regression candidates at every position for the 2026 NFL fantasy football season. We are going to start with quarterbacks today. First quarterback on our list is going to be Super Bowl champion Sam Darnold. Sam Darnold had a pretty good season last year, had 25 total touchdowns. He obviously goes to the Seahawks, wins the Super Bowl, plays fantastic all year. The problem I see with Sam Darnold, and not as a quarterback, but as in fantasy production this year, is JSN towards the end of the season last year started to receive a lot more attention from defenses as he broke out last year. And don't get me wrong, JSN was amazing, but that is going to happen again this year. He's going to be targeted more by defenses, and losing Kenneth Walker III and his explosiveness is going to give teams the option to cover the pass a lot more this season. Zach Charbonnet is fine. He is a good running back at best, I would say, but he does not have the explosion that Kenneth Walker III had. He is a guy who can get you 3 to 5 yards a carry with not a lot of explosive upside. Also, with how good the Seahawks were last year, they are going to have a very difficult schedule this year in the NFL, and they are going to have a target on their back being the Super Bowl champions. So I could see Sam Darnold, even though he was a game manager last year, JSN kind of got released as a secret weapon for him and really amplified his numbers because JSN was so amazing. I do not see that happening as much this year. So look for some regression for Sam Darnold. If you're looking for a late round pick, fine, but just don't expect him to be a top 12 guy. Our next quarterback is Jacoby Brissett. I call him Jacoby Brissett. He was a fantasy darling last year as far as a sleeper quarterback goes, and really it came down to game script for the Cardinals. The Cardinals defense was atrocious and just got carved through by everyone. It felt like 5 minutes into every game they were down 2 touchdowns. And what did that lead to? Jacoby Brissett just throwing up bombs the entire game, and defenses giving the Cardinals most of their bombs and a lot of those points, and knowing they could absorb those points and still win the games. They get a new head coach this year in Mike LaFleur, and it's going to stabilize and improve the offense a lot, in my opinion, but it is still going to be a new system for everybody. And I think Jacoby Brissett is actually probably going to be more productive in a more meaningful way in meaningful games, because I think the Cardinals are going to be a lot more competitive on a game-to-game basis this year. And don't get me wrong, Brissett has a ton of passing weapons, but with the lack of running game that the Cardinals have, I really think teams are going to load up on passing defense. Brissett is not a mobile guy, and I could see him taking a lot of sacks this year, and I could see his upside being limited with tighter game script. Don't be afraid to pick him up and plug and play him on a week-to-week basis, but definitely not a guy I'm looking to draft. The last quarterback I'm going to mention here is a bit divisive. You talk to anyone, they either sort of love, hate him, they think he's overrated, they think he's underrated, and that is Bo Nix of the Denver Broncos. Bo Nix had an awesome season last year until, of course, he fractured his ankle at the end of a playoff game and basically left the team for ruins in the AFC Championship. So that really sucked for him. But we are looking at fantasy. He is going to be back. He is in camp, and he looks like he's going to be ready for the start of the season. While I like a lot of what I saw from Bo Nix last year, and I would almost call him like a mini Josh Allen. I'm not comparing him to Josh Allen. I'm saying mini in every way you can imagine. Mini Josh Allen. I would also say he isn't as productive, and he was a big volume guy last year. He made a lot of his production off passing attempts, rushing attempts. A lot went through him. I think Sean Payton was really trying to get him comfortable in his system and just give him as many reps as possible. And while he gets Jalen Waddle this year, which is great, so he's going to have Courtland Sutton and Jalen Waddle and not just Courtland Sutton, and we'll talk about Courtland Sutton in a little bit, spoiler alert, but I also think Sean Payton's going to be careful with him. Coming off this major injury, they're going to protect the quarterback. It's going to be a lot of fast throws. I can see him working off volume again. I see some explosive plays happening for him between Sutton and Waddle every game, but the Broncos are truly built on just having a great defense, and I could really see Sean Payton taking a step back with Bo Nix this year, considering the injury, and turning him a little bit more into a game manager and leaning a little bit more on that run game with RJ Harvey this year. All right, on to my top 3 running backs that I could see having big regression this season. I'm going to start with my absolute favorite, and I don't think anyone should be drafting this guy in the top 12. I see absolute massive bombastic regression coming for the overall number one fantasy running back last year, and that is Christian McCaffrey, Mr. CMC himself. CMC looked terrible last year, at least in the running game. He still has it as a pass catcher and as a route runner. He is probably the best in the league still, so props to him. That's where he's going to get a ton of his value. But I'm going to tell you this. He looked awful running the football. He had one of the worst broken tackle rates. He literally, if you watch him, he couldn't break a tackle anywhere. He ranked 30th among top 32 running backs in yards per carry. The dude just has lost all of his explosiveness. He is aging. He had 400 touches last year. I have never seen a coach with such a hard-on for a running back. And obviously there's history there between Kyle Shanahan and Christian McCaffrey and Mike Shanahan and Ed McCaffrey, and their families are very intertwined. He's just going to feed Christian McCaffrey until he has one foot in the grave. But Mr. Kyle Shanahan, concussion boy from his car accident, has already said that they're going to pull back his touches this year if they want him to remain healthy. Kyle Shanahan's an incredible coach. Everybody knows any running back in that system can be explosive and dominant. He's shown that over the years. And I think if the 49ers want to get back to being a playoff team, being a competitive team, at some point is going to have to rip the nepotism off of Christian McCaffrey and lighten that workload. I see those 400 touches coming down to something like 300 this year, and Christian McCaffrey likely, I do see him still getting a ton of touchdowns. He's such a little touchdown vulture, and he's still great in the passing game, but I don't see him finishing RB1, and I could see him finishing more like RB 10, 11, 12, and that's if he stays healthy. I could really see Christian McCaffrey getting hurt at some point in the season, finishing mid RB2, or depending on when he gets hurt, not even being relevant in the season. So if you're going to draft Christian McCaffrey, don't do it early and get like 3 of his backup running backs. Lastly, and this one's going to be pretty controversial, this guy was RB2 or 3, depending on the format you played in last year, Jonathan Taylor. Jonathan Taylor had 18 total touchdowns in the regular season last year. That's ridiculous. He was incredible. He was amazing. This is not a knock on Jonathan Taylor. The problem is the moment Daniel Jones got hurt, he was nothing. He was just awful, and it wasn't his fault. It's because teams absolutely stacked the box because they didn't have to worry about the passing game from the Colts. And now, I get it. Daniel Jones is back this year. But one of the things that made Jonathan Taylor so good was Daniel Jones' mobility. That's one thing, when Daniel Jones isn't falling on his face 70 yards down the field, he's a really fast, big, mobile quarterback. And coming off this huge injury, I just think that mobility is definitely going to be peeled back. Teams are still going to load the box, and they're going to say, Daniel Jones, why don't you beat us? Daniel Jones has never been able to show over the long run that he can be a consistently good passing quarterback, especially from the pocket, without using his legs as a threat. And I think that is going to hinder Jonathan Taylor enormously. I could see Taylor still getting 10 touchdowns, but it's not 18. Right? He's going to have a massive regression. And I still see him probably finishing like RB6, RB7, RB8, somewhere in that range. But we're not talking RB1, 2, or 3 overall in the league. So just something to keep in mind when you're drafting Jonathan Taylor, or if someone's trying to ship him to you in Dynasty or something like that. All right, on to our wide receivers for the day. We've got 3 of them for you, and we are going to go back to Houston and talk about Nico Collins. Now, I've been a Nico Collins truther from the get-go. I've always thought he was amazing. Top 5 wide receiver in the NFL in my mind as far as talent goes. The problem is he just cannot stay healthy. Like, if this dude could stay healthy, I'm not calling him Calvin Johnson, but he's like a little below that. He's kind of like Andre Johnson from the Texans back in the day. Like, that's how good this guy truly is. He can beat anyone with any route with his size, speed, athleticism. He's so good, but he gets injured all the time. And also, Tank Dell is coming back. CJ Stroud and Tank Dell are like absolute best friends. CJ Stroud once called Tank Dell the best receiver in the NFL. He's going to try and get his buddy going again. Now, I think this is good for Nico Collins. It's going to soften the double coverage up on him a little bit, and it could free him up. But man, those injury scares are just so sketchy. So just be careful. I'm not a guy who likes to draft high injury prone players. And you'll hear a lot of people out there say, oh, well, you can't predict injuries. If it happens one time, sure. If it happens a second, it's a pattern. And with Nico Collins, we're on like 5 or 6 at this point, and we're still like, he's still not even in the peak of his career, and it's just a little concerning for me. So I'm fading Nico Collins unless I can get him at a good price this year. Ooh, this next one is just a player I love to hate going into this season, and I really couldn't stand him last year. That is going to be the drama toxic-filled A.J. Brown, formerly now of the Philadelphia Eagles and now a New England Patriot. Oh my goodness, this is just the most fun topic of the offseason is A.J. Brown, because A.J. Brown loves to put attention on A.J. Brown. And let me tell you something about A.J. Brown. A lot of people, including him, think that he's going to New England and he's going to have this massive resurgence. I would compare the way this narrative is similar to when Stephon Diggs initially left the Vikings and went to the Bills with Josh Allen. And he had this massive peak in his career with his second team in the prime of his career. Guess what, though? That already happened for A.J. Brown. That was him with the Eagles. He went from the Titans. He did his stint there. He evolved as a player in his prime playing the Eagles and completely slumped last year. To take the toxicity aside and all the stuff he was leaking to the media, like from the locker room throughout the season, his explosive rate was down, his speed was down, his route running looked awful, and he thinks he's going to Drake May and things are going to be better than with Jalen Hurts when they were winning Super Bowls. Absolutely not. Like, Drake May is a good quarterback, but they had the easiest schedule I've ever seen last year. That is going to be completely flipped this year. And what's going to happen when things start not going his way? You're going to see that A.J. Brown toxicity come out again. Let some idiot person in your league draft A.J. Brown, and you'll watch after 2 or 3 weeks them trying to ship A.J. Brown away, okay? He's going to have just as good of a season as Stephon Diggs did last year for the Patriots. Maybe a little better. But remember, that was not Stephon Diggs in his prime. And it's fine. But we're going to be talking about late wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 type of A.J. Brown this year. I can guarantee you that. And that organization is an absolute mess with Mike Vrabel and his offseason antics. Like, it's honestly the best and worst place for A.J. Brown to go because it fits his toxicity as a player, but it's going to be a dumpster fire in New England this year. Like, and we'll get to this in another video, but whatever the over-under is on the New England Patriots win total, smash the under this year. So, yeah, big thumbs down on A.J. Brown this year, and he will regress even from his mediocrity from last season. All right, and the last wide receiver we're going to talk about today, we're heading back to Denver. We're going to be talking about Courtland Sutton. So, Courtland Sutton gets a teammate in Jalen Waddle. Yes, massive Dolphins fan here. I love Jalen Waddle, and I can tell you from somebody who watches every single Dolphins game, is Jalen Waddle, and most people don't know this, Broncos fans don't know this, he gets injured every single game, mid-game, and he will come back, but this dude will miss 1 to 2 quarters, and this is hyperbole, maybe, but he really misses 1 to 2 quarters every single game. That's at least what it feels like, and that's the production you're often going to get from him. You're going to see Jalen Waddle in there, he's going to have 3 catches for 50 yards, and it'll almost be the end of the first half, and he's going to get banged up, and you might see him at the end of the fourth quarter, and he might get 1 more catch for 7 yards. That's Jalen Waddle. And he's awesome. He just has so many injury problems. Now, the good thing is, he goes into a situation, not as good as it was in Miami with Tyreek Hill there, in fact, I think Jalen Waddle should have been even more productive in Miami than he was when he had prime Tyreek Hill right next to him. But he's going into a situation where he's basically going to be tied for lead dog. He's going to be like 1B, and Courtland Sutton's going to be like 1B. And I think having those 2 consistent receivers is going to be really good for Bo Nix and for the Broncos. And it's a really good addition for the Broncos, and it's going to be good for the team overall. I just don't see a position where we're in with Jalen Waddle from last year. He really was the 1A in Miami for most of the season, and he had some big production weeks because of it. So injury concerns, new place to play, a team that relies on defense is probably going to be more run heavy this year. I would fade Jalen Waddle a little bit here unless you're looking for a stack with him and Courtland Sutton, which I could like. All right, lastly today, we're going to be visiting tight ends. We're going to be talking about 3 aging tight ends today, which I know is maybe a little soft, a little easy, a little predictable, but it really feels like we're entering a new era of tight ends. A lot of young guns over the last 2 to 3 years that are taking the league by storm right now. And I'll get through these guys pretty quickly, but let's talk about Mr. Swifty himself, Travis Kelce. This dude is so ancient, so washed at this point, and he really is just a relic in Kansas City. And this is not to take away from his career, because what an amazing career. Probably the second best tight end of all time in my mind, behind Gronk. And and if you add his overall numbers and his longevity, you can easily make a case he's better than Gronk. But as far as like absolute peak tight end freak, I would want Gronk over Kelce. But Kelce's amazing. I'm not knocking that, but he is so old. He looks so slow, and they just look like they're trying to force feed him all the time. But he is just not getting off. He is not getting his routes run correctly or efficiently, and he's not getting separation, and he looks frustrated, and that part of him isn't going away. I really think they're keeping him around, and I think if the Chiefs want to be successful, they really are going to have to start limiting his snap count or reutilizing him as a player. I could still see him being effective in the red zone, but man, he strikes me more as like a Mark Andrews-esque player at this point in his career. And I think the Chiefs need to realize that if they want to be successful again, which Mahomes, I don't want to go off on a tangent about Mahomes, and I love Mahomes. He's, probably like the 3rd best quarterback in NFL history at this point. Like, that's not hyperbole. And he's chasing Tom Brady. And he himself has said, if he's going to catch Tom Brady, he's going to need to win 8 Super Bowls because Tom beat him in a Super Bowl. And that's, I give him a ton of credit for that. But this is really the second half of his career. He's coming off a big injury, Mahomes is, and the pieces just don't add up for Kelce. Let someone else who is a big freaking Swifty fan or Kelce fan or Chiefs fan draft him. But time to move on from Kelce. All right, the other one, this one's very interesting. I won't spend too long on this guy, but Hunter Henry, just the absolute most boomer bust tight end in the NFL, super veteran, and honestly reminds me, I think he's a better player than Travis Kelce at this point. He's still a really good player, but the Patriots just were one of those teams last year that if they really needed him, they would utilize him and he would produce like crazy. And then when they were killing all these teams and, beating up on the Jets 40-0, they'd give him a break because he was a vet. And so I see him probably around the same snap share considering his age this year, but he's just so untrustworthy. So not a dude to draft. I wouldn't rely on his numbers repeating from last season, but a dude you might be looking to plug and play on a week-to-week basis. And lastly, let's talk about one more aging tight end, and I might get some heat for this. And this dude was great for me last season when he played, and for a lot of people. Tight end George Kittle of the San Francisco 49ers. George Kittle is the best of these 3 players that I mentioned by far. When he is out there, he is still an absolute specimen freak. He is fantastic. He's like almost Gronk level. Not Gronk, but right up there. Just a total badass on the field. The problem is those injuries are stacking up. But here's what I'll say. Here's the good news here. Take his backup, Jake Tunges, who is a fantastic tight end. If you want to get Kittle, wait till the 6th or 7th, 8th round. I got him last year in the 7th round in a draft. And I was like, Kittle, I got. And everyone was like, I can't believe he fell that far to you, yada, yada, yada. Okay, I grabbed him, guess what? He got hurt. But you know what? I got his backup. And every time I played him, even in the fantasy football championship, the dude had 75 yards and a touchdown, Jake Tunges did. So go ahead and grab yourself some Kittle. If you can get him in the 7th, 8th, 9th round and grab Jake Tunges with him because he's going to go undrafted. So George Kittle, the injuries are just too much. It's a weird situation in the 49ers. There's drama and confusion all in the 49ers organization. And do I think they get back on track this year? Maybe. It's a total coin flip from me. So let somebody else draft him based on his points per game numbers from last year. Unless he falls to you, then he's going to be a good value. All right, that is all I've got for today. If y'all wouldn't mind liking the video, subscribe, let me know what you agree, disagree with, and if you see any other major regression candidates coming in this year, I would love to cover them and talk about them. All right, peace out.